Okay, this is part two of the personality talk. Um, all right, so little historical context. End of the 1800s, you have Freud coming along, and it's the Victorian era. It's repressed, blah blah blah. And you also have Pavlov and behaviorism coming along. All right, so you cannot point to somebody's unconscious and demonstrate it. So the behaviorists hate this, and behaviorism is like, to a Freudian, makes no sense at all. That's not why people do what they do. Anyway, kind of in this whole mix, there's also these people who are like, wait a minute, let's just look at how people describe other people. So Gordon Allport, um, I like some other things Allport did later, but um, early on, he comes up with 4,500 words in English that describe people. And he starts organizing them, what works, what goes together. And he says cardinal traits are the ones that are like dominant. You know, this person is a born leader or something like that. I don't know. Central traits are kind of a little more day to day, and that's how you would really describe a person. He's affable, he's friendly, he's, stuff like that. Secondary traits are less obvious. Um, how do you use 4,500 items to describe a person, though? It's kind of too much. So Cattell came along. Allport actually worked with some statistical stuff also, but Cattell actually did statistical analysis to see how they go together in like hundreds or thousands of surveys and stuff where they would have people answer questions. And he got those 4,500 down to 171. More manageable, still a heck of a lot. But he said those tend to clump together into 16 dimensions. Okay, we're going to get narrower than that yet in a little while. But anyway, so let's say 16 for now. All right, so the Isaacs, they um, they're going to come back to this whole four humors. So I'm not real wild about the Isaacs, but they put in the dimensions of extroversion, introversion, and neuroticism stability. You may recognize that this kind of resembles Wilhelm Wundt, not in extroversion, introversion, but um, uh, in terms of, well, changeability and stuff like that. So they say you can look at how all this stuff maps out in a couple of dimensions. So easier to understand. But then finally, by the 70s and 80s, there's a lot more statistical analysis going on, and they're getting it down to eventually the big five, which you may or may not like. Um, uh, but openness, is a person open to new experience, or do they like things to stay the same? Conscientious, is a person impulsive, or are they going to be dependable and organized? And it's not good or bad on any of these, really. Um, you know, the impulsive, careless people are sometimes really fun and really creative. Extroversion, introversion, which, yeah, we've seen these things show up again and again. Agreeable, critical, or helpful, you know. And then neuroticism, which neurotic used to be a diagnosis, by the way. It's not anymore. But here they're using it to describe a person's like anxiety or calm. Okay. And then somebody says, wait, we need a little more. So Hexaco came along. So 6 traits, honesty, humility being added. And then emotionality is neuroticism, basically. And then extroversion, agreeableness, conscientiousness, and openness are the same from the big five. Okay. Culture brings in some other factors. And one big thing is that Asian cultures and a lot of others, a lot of indigenous cultures are more collectivist. So in Hawaii, uh, the state scores highest in collectivism in the US. Um, so, and I should say that in cultural research these days, basically, we tend to see collectivism and individualism as being, instead of being like extremes of a line, to vary a lot depending on situation. Um, so that makes them what's called orthogonal, which means you can be high or low in collectivism and high or low in individualism, and that might change depending on the situation. So it's kind of a complex thing now. Okay, there are variations in how testing comes out across just the US, one country, and people tend to clump together with people who are kind of like them. Interesting, huh? Selective migration is one effect of this. Um, okay, individualism, collectivism, I already mentioned. Collectivists value harmony more, and this is why Hawaii, there's, you want to downplay your conflict here. For one thing, you're on a tiny island, and you're going to run into that person at Costco. So you don't want to have ongoing um, um, disagreements with people. Individualism, it's more like I did it my way, you know. Okay, a lot of this is done by self-report. So you would answer questions. The MMPI has 338 questions, which comes down to 10 scales, not 16 like Cattell found, a little bit narrower. And these are interesting. You can score in a kind of a normative range. Once you go past the upper or lower bound on a particular dimension, that would be potentially diagnosable as a personality disorder. And a lot of these scales will use a Likert scale of, like how much do you agree or disagree with this on a scale of 1 to 5, that kind of thing. Or the MMPI actually is true false, 338 questions, all true false. As people have tried to figure this stuff out, especially if you're Freudian and you're looking at the unconscious, you might want to look at things that are more nebulous. How does a person interpret this picture here? I think it looks like a butterfly. Well, that means that you're blah, blah, blah. These actually don't work out well. If you want to validate something like this, you would want what's called inter-rater reliability. You would want it to be that if I have 20 participants tell what they see when they see, a set of Rorschachs, and then we give that to 10 psychologists to interpret, you would want the interpretations to all be the same. That is not how it works. They do not match up. So this is not really considered a valid test anymore. The TAT, thematic apperception, is kind of like that. It'll be stories. I'll show you in just a sec. And then Julian Rotter, who we saw just a moment ago, has complete sentences like this, and you would look at those. Okay, so real quick here, let's take a look at some TAT, thematic apperception, which are pictures like this. What is the story in this picture here, and how you tell that story would indicate to me something about your personality. So they're not real clear what's going on, and that's the point. So how you interpret that would be an indicator of your personality health or disorder and stuff like that. Okay, thank you. And that is that.